All right, let's dive into the concepts that we're going to be using to explore engagement in our workshop event next week. First, let's look at some shared language, some terminology that we're going to be using. And if we have a shared meaning around it, we'll be able to go further faster when we get together. Well, let's first start with the word engagement. When I use engagement, what I mean is the willingness of people to give their discretionary effort. The willingness of people to do more than what they seem is expected. That's what engagement is. Now, some people might talk about engagement as satisfaction or contentment or happiness. And that's one way to talk about it. But what we really want is people to be willing to dive in. Other people might talk about the willingness of people to recommend your organization, your meeting, your training, or your event to others. That's more about loyalty. We want to dive into engagement. I want you to bring all your best ideas. But the way that we'll talk about engagement is that willingness to give that extra effort. Now, what about context? When I talk about the context of engagement, I want to start to explore the idea of workplace, not just the brick and mortar building, but also the culture and systems that they experience there. That's the context of the workplace. Now, the context of meetings is that place where people get together to achieve a common objective. It could be that you're about just building your team together in a meeting. It could be about sharing information. It can be about finding agreement or planning or decision-making, maybe even troubleshooting and creativity and design. Those are all desired outcomes of these gatherings of people that are all trying to get to the same place. That's when we talk about meetings, that's the context of meetings. The third context we're going to explore is that of events. And those could be like conferences or training events. And that's where a group of people get together intentionally for interaction, for development and advancement for individuals and for the organization. So those are the contexts that we're going to be talking about. And last, some other important terms that we need to have a shared understanding of is like where. When we talk about the where, that's when we're talking about, are we going to do this in person or are we going to do this virtually? And this is where some of the confusion comes in, because people will just say, and there's a third option, which is hybrid. That's where there's some people in person, there's some people virtually. The problem is that looks different. You know, the very first time you answered an email on your smartphone when you weren't in your office, you worked hybrid or you worked virtually. And if you're in a national organization that doesn't have an office, but everybody gets together maybe once or twice a year for a conference, guess what? You worked in person then. So there's this whole continuum of where you can do your work, or where you can have your meeting, or where you can have your event. So when we define hybrid, it's not just some people in and some people out. We're talking about this continuum between in-person and virtual. What about when and what? These are where the terms synchronous and asynchronous come in. Synchronous means that you're working in the same place on the same thing, like in meetings. Could be virtual, could be in person. Asynchronous means that you're working at different times and probably not at the same thing. So asynchronous is about working at a different time on a different thing. Synchronous means same time, same thing.